Hey guys, Robert and Ingrid here, and we got an interesting and pretty obscure movie to talk about on at the movies, but it's a movie that I've heard about from a podcast I used to watch called 2-in-1 Showcase. It's the second in the franchise, even though, but it's definitely a lot of people's beloved favorite. It's the Gamers Dorkness Rising. And well, Ingrid, you're the D&D expert, so tell people a little bit about because I've seen it many times. This is our first time seeing it, so give people a bit of a summary on what you saw it.
All right then. So basically, you've got your classic, almost like in self-aware, stereotypical gaming table. It's just like, you've got a bunch of guys down in the basement. They're all interested in wanting to kill all of the NPCs and even seduce the NPCs and even one another's characters before the game has even really begun. But this time, there's a girl joining the table, and she's approaching the whole game differently. They sort of have all of these ideas about what role they'd like her to play in the party, like, ooh.
Well, her ex is like, here, chainmail bikini.
Yeah, and it's just like, oh, you're playing a fighter? But then she does something that they don't expect.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. Well, we'll get to that one. Sorry. But, okay, but here's it, though. It's about the tale of, the group. They have a bit of a reputation for horsing around. And one of them,
treating the general story like a joke and generally, like,
one of them is working on
making the DM sort of have a headache over the fact that they're not putting any appreciation into the works of its plots. Though really it's sort of a case of there's kind of toxicity on all sides here because they turn it into the DM versus the players mentality rather than the DM is a collaborative storyteller with the players kind of mentality.
Well, it helps, but it doesn't help that he's trying to experiment and prototype his own story, and everything. So, I mean, he wants to get published, so he wants to prototype it, but these guys don't want to take it seriously at all.
It's just like, meanwhile, our gal here is sort of like, I love how they establish her character.
Oh yeah, walks right into the room, and then all these guys are looking at her first. Remember that? They're like, ooh. But yeah,
one of the first things they do is in their ostensible session 0, which is sort of the game you have where you build your characters and discuss the world and stuff. Before that's ever started, she finds she's making a fighter, but she's making a fighter that quote-unquote breaks all of the rules of how a fighter should be made. But what she's really breaking is their conventional expectations for how a fighter should be played. She's actually paying very close attention to the actual rules of the game, as we'll see later on in her actual playtimes. I love how they established her just right off the bat as somebody who's willing to take this game in good faith. It's just that this table kind of has a culture established about it already.
3 of them anyway. 3 of them anyway.
Yeah.
The DM, he's the one who's trying to take it seriously, but he's too engrossed in wanting to get his thing prototyped and get through at least one session where they win. And now we got to start at the beginning. They already had a party that got wiped out. Completely, total party wipeout.
Ah, yes, the total party kill and the subsequent PTSD that comes from that, because
one of them quit.
Party kill sessions really aren't that fun. That's not much exaggeration there.
That's why one of the ones that's there at the beginning, he quits and like, I'm out. That's why they had to bring the girl in because they couldn't get it. And like, but we need 5 people. Relax, I've got it. Now we also have you have Cass. He's the guy who wants to be the monk. And I love that debate. It's like, like, I want to be a monk. You can't be a monk. It's in a Western setting. But it's like, okay, fine. You want to be a monk? Western monk. That means bald. And then he tried to say, I also want to be an elf. No, you can't do that. No elves. You have the bard, of which I love it. Like, you're normally the warrior type. What's the difference?
It's just like, I'm like face palming, but I'm also grabbing my popcorn. It's like, oh, this is gonna be good.
And then you have the guy who is dressed up. It's obviously the hot chick who's chaotic neutral. He's so chaotic evil, and but he's basing her off of his math teacher, and I love it. How in this movie, in the story, and when they're in the world, if she's in character, complete character, it's the actress playing her. When he's completely being himself, it's the guy in the role and dressed up in the outfit and everything.
Which is a very hilarious contrast. It's just like,
especially when he tries to hit, she tries to hit, he tries to hit on a barmaid. It's like, you're a woman. Oh, right. But still hits on her anyway. But yeah, but yeah, so it's decided they're going to do it. Now, of course, Amelia, I just saw right before, and it's like, oh, like, you haven't even met yet. Okay, bang you later. See you then. And what the first thing they do is bang him right in the middle of it. And then that's why I love how the girl later on, she even calls him out saying, like, you seduced them right in front of the king.
Yeah, it's just like no situational awareness.
Exactly. And eventually, like they get that out of their system. The guy, they made it very clear, the monk, he's not an elf. I love it. Rips the air, they're like, not an elf. Yeah, they're being sent by the clergy, basically, to go and find this item, this great, powerful item. And but basically, though, when they take off, though, now it's that whole notion of in universe arc, because they've done this. This is not their first time doing this, trying to attempt the story arc. So that's like, oh, well, we're going to get on, because we know where to go. Your character doesn't know. And the girl's trying to be like, it's what my character would do. But then when they do, blow them up. How much XP do I get?
Which is even more hilarious since in 5e, there's sort of like two agreed upon methods of progression. One is the standard EXP route, and the other one is story milestones. So it kind of helps to prevent that particular behavior a little bit, because it's just like, you have to actually do the plot to get more powerful.
Yep, and then the NPCs, so they can have a fifth member, they give him a paladin, as they're all going, oh no, stop! Oh, because basically, like, he's going to be the NPC in there. And as he states later on, it's to keep him on task. Otherwise, they'd be killing and impregnating everyone in his world. It's like, which he has a good point, but it's like, but I just love it. They all going like, oh, great, a cop. And even say he's what's the word? Something stupid,
lawful stupid, which is basically when it's just like, oh, I am going to follow these rules really super strictly, which is how most people try to play lawful good characters, but honestly, that trends more towards lawful neutral, where you just care about the rule following and not about the spirit behind them. But that's a whole other can of worms.
Right, but the character is definitely lawful. The paladin is definitely, they play him up as lawful stupid. And basically, they go on their journey, and they start going on the journey and everything. And I will say this, when they're actually being in character, not goofing around, they're not a bad party.
They actually are clever and know what to do. The bard sometimes ends up singing songs to end up getting around encounters without combat. Sometimes you have some creative and funny uses of spell casting.
We'll get to all those, but I also like that Cass, even though he's a jerk, he's the group jerk, he's good at what he's doing when he's actually taking it seriously. It bites him in the butt at the very end, but still, but then they get to their first big fight. And that's what the girl's whole thing. She gets like, how many kills? Basically, like, every time she gets a critical hit, she keeps on getting another strike and another strike. And they're like,
it's clear that she min-maxed her character in a way that was entirely different from the particular meta, but displayed that effect that she was paying attention to the rules and understood the game that she was trying to play.
And then she was able to stab 3 of them at once. Yeah, you go through all that. And then, the spellcasters are like, I'm going to do a lightning spell. Okay, in 2 hits. They take everyone else out, and then they use it on the bard. Get ready. The bard's going to die a lot. But this first one, and I do like it how the Dungeon Master, he knew what was coming when they had the bard. That's why they gave him the Staff of Resurrection. You know that, right? That's why, because...
Yep, this is what happens when you try to play a squishy glass cannon character like a tank. You're going to get very predictable results.
Exactly. And they eventually make their way to a tavern, which leads to another bit of fighting and everything. But as a case, again, where they're starting to really get a good understanding, and I do like it how they do start, like the bard, he gives a little hint of where they're going, but he's like, and that's all I know. Like, at least he's like, okay, he's restraining himself. He could have his character know everything, but instead he reined it in and be like, no, don't have him know everything.
Mm-hmm.
I do like that. As it goes on, they do start to mellow it out a bit. Did you notice that? How, again, at first they're trying to be like, oh, we know everything. I think because of the influence of the girl, they decided, you know what, that's going to be boring and stupid.
Mm-hmm. It's like they're sort of like watching somebody play through your favorite video game for the first time, and it's just like, you know what? Maybe it would be better if I let them discover stuff for themselves and maybe give hints every now and again when they get stuck on things, rather than trying to backseat game the entire time.
Oh, I forgot. You also have that point before. Wait, was it before or after the tavern where the first time they had to trick the paladin? I forgot.
I think it was afterwards,
Oh, after,
but I don't remember
then
very
during
well.
during it, they had to, well, yeah, basically it's like, I could distract him. Roll for it. And that the paladin has to be played off as a major idiot. You're like, oh, where is it? Where is it? While they're torturing. Even the girl says, why don't we torture him? Even she's going along with it. And then when they get back, and they didn't get much out of him.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also get some of their day lives. Like the guy doing the bard is he owns the game store.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a point then where you have this pub with ninjas and pizza and all that. Turned out it was just another game they were playing. Let me guess, you were probably like, what is this? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you were like that, like, what is all this? And you thought, oh, it's just a little randomness of them playing something else. But when they pick up
it's sort of a case of just like, oh, we had our usual DM out sick for one night, so we ended up improving a different game, so we didn't have to cancel.
Right. But yeah, but then the guy with the bard, he has a stack of them, we later find out.
Mm-hmm.
Like 50 of them. So they go into another action sequence. And, well, actually, no. Eventually, we did have a point where they have to deal with, they have to torture, get some information out. No, they get someone else with them. They want to kill him. But the bard, the paladin's there. They don't want to have him do it. And they ended like, you have to do it in character. So the guy playing the sorceress whispers to the monk, and he's like, fine then. So they kill him, and then they use a spell to freeze him, him in place, and then use an amnesia spell. And I love how the DM side's like, okay, you did a good move. Like, the paladin doesn't remember anything in the past 2 minutes.
And there is actually spells in the game that do that, although it's definitely a lot higher level, though I'm sort of going to hand wave at it. Oh, it was probably a past edition or something, and they're going for the spirit of the game rather than the strict mechanics.
Exactly. But I did like how the DM just sighs and be like, all right, I'll give you that one. You did what I said.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, then they eventually deal with what was it, an undead being or whatever, a demon?
Something along those lines.
And that leads to a big fight. But I love it how it's like, the guy doing the monk tries to do a move, and it's like, this is out of your class. If I roll a 20, I will win. Not only does he not get a 20, he gets a natural 1.
Yeah, that was hilarious. It's just like, let me do this thing a roll of cool. And then roll it, botch.
Beyond botch. Like, now I am controlling your character. And I love how you have the actor who does the DM is the monk that time.
Yeah.
But I do love how Cass is all like, okay, I admit I botched it. Like, he at least admits it. He doesn't argue too much about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because seriously, if this guy was a bigger asshole, he would have fought it. But in this case,
yeah, there's a situation, and I can think of in iGames where another one of the players sort of ended up falling under the spell of one of the villains we were fighting, because he had previously been turned undead due to previous shenanigans, and the person we were fighting was a necromancer who temporarily took control of him.
Yeah. But in this case, he just also, he took a shot. And again, not only did he not get it right, he totally screwed up.
Mm-hmm. Which, that's very frequently happens. Sometimes the dice just hate you.
Exactly. And then during this all, the bard keeps getting killed, but because he keeps using different sheets, it's different bards. And then the sorcerer decides, I need somebody to protect him. Hide behind the pile of bards. I'm like, that's when you knew they were really getting into it.
It's just like, I mean...
That is separate. When you have different character sheets, I mean, they were different bards.
Mm-hmm. It's just like...
Where they came from, who could say it in universe?
It's one of those wacky instances of unconventional D&D problem solving. It sounds insane on paper.
I mean, if you had someone who had just a bunch of character sheets of different bards and they kept getting killed off, what are you gonna do with them?
Mm-hmm. I mean, the other thing is that if you had a character who knew some necromancy, you could then go ahead and raise all of the dead bards and get a second use out of them.
Yeah, but then I love it. They defeat it. Then they ask the priest to bless the water, threatened it, but it's like the paladin won't allow it. Oh, look at that over there! Like, I don't even need to trick him. He just chooses to do it. You know, like, I think because the DM realized, like, oh God, I'm kind of writing myself into a corner at this point.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you can't threaten even a neck because that's under law. You know, does a paladin usually be that stupid where they're like you can't even kill or harm a necromancer or a demon?
Well, it's sort of part of how the actual paladin class itself developed over different editions of D&D, because up until the most recent edition, 5th edition, paladins were strictly required to be lawful good. And there was like a lot of like rules around what sort of stuff costs you, what makes you not have your powers anymore or whatnot. But 5th edition sort of did a lot to expand that, because not only did it get rid of the alignment restrictions, it made a lot of different more types of paladins than your typical goody two-shoes. You got nature paladins, you've got edgy vengeance paladins, you've got evil conquest and oathbreaker paladins. There's just a lot more flavor in the class now. And given that my first major D&D character started out as a lawful good paladin, who I decided to play more of the lawful common sense route, as just like, guys, you do realize that doing all of this immoral stuff might end up biting us in the butt in the long run. Yeah, she was more like the mom of or babysitter of the party than she was like a cop.
Right. Oh, and just to also point out, they were using 3rd edition for this game.
Yeah, and definitely paladins were a lot stricter in that edition, and it's just, I definitely think that a lot of the problems that came from those particular paladins being played that way in past editions is why things are a little bit looser in 5th edition. Like,
yeah. Believe it or not, it looks like they actually did, for a brief time, make a Dungeon Crawl Classic based off of this. Yeah, and it's called the Mask of Death, which is what they're doing. They're going after a necromancer who has the Mask of Death. But yeah, eventually they make their way there, and then they find Nauen. Which you didn't know about him until I told you, did you?
Yeah, no, I guess I'm still a little bit catching up on a lot of the
TTRPG. Sure. But yeah, he's basically a well-known henchman. And what's a henchman?
Someone who's a servant to the bad guy.
Or the good guys, even. And basically, this is then where they find out their box of loot is there. And what's in the loot? Everything from their last party.
Ooh.
But, okay, given how the DM operates, how the hell do you let them get away with some of these weapons? There was like a lightsaber, a shotgun. You're like, what? But when they go with the deal with the necromancer, it turns out the necromancer has risen up the prior parties as now NPCs, and Cass calls them out saying, I don't recall giving you permission to make my character an NPC. It's like, ooh, because I'm pretty sure that's not allowed, right? To just casually do that.
It really depends on one of those things that's dependent on the table. Because, like, sometimes...
Doing it without asking.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's the sort of thing that you definitely want to talk with in advance. Because I've heard of a case where on one of the popular D&D channels I watch to get advice, Matthew Colville, where he sort of did a plot line where one of the particular characters wound up dying in a fight against this, like, Viscount guy, And then after discussing stuff with the player in private, they later ended up starting to see her later as a like new raised vampire villainess or whatnot. But the key difference is it asked him to do it, and it's just like making sure you have a good line of communication when you're playing games like these is so very, very important. Being able to have a table that's like willing to talk through these things. I've certainly had my own fair share of instances of things like that happening where a lack of communication turned what otherwise would have been a really cool plot bad.
Right. But then they finally do stop them after they fight together very well. And then later on, though, they're still going though. So like, well, we won. If we won, then why are we still playing? Good question, right?
Yeah, it's just like, well, you haven't ended the session yet. What's going to happen? It's like sort of seeing like, oh, the heroes won, and then seeing that there's like still 30 minutes left in the movie.
And then it turns out the clergy was the bad guy. Did you see that coming at all?
I didn't see it coming like specifically, but I sort of like, oh yeah, I've had that sort of thing happen in my D&D games before, where after we took out the more obvious bad guy, there was somebody who was like hiding in the ranks amongst the alleged good guys that ended up being the real piece of work because they got this whole self-righteous, holier than thou complex that makes them think, oh, because I'm supposedly on the side of good, I can use this super evil thing that has definitely corrupted and killed a lot of people for the side of good with zero problems.
Right.
Because I'm just that good. And it's just like, no, you're high off your own self-righteousness. We gotta go take you down.
Now, earlier, I should point out, when they first met the clergy, I did like how the sorcerers were all like, what is that? So like, can I take it? Well, seeing this house their most royal object, and you're in a place followed entirely with paladins, doing so would be complete suicide. Ugh.
Yeah, sometimes you have to manage the logistics of that better.
I did like how he explained how he just said like, because house are most holy of relics or items, and it's there, it's full of paladins. What do you think's gonna happen?
It's just like sometimes being the bad guy isn't just a matter of strict numbers of DPS. You have to work around the social or the political situation too, because it's just like, it doesn't matter if you know the evil chancellor is an asshole. If you assassinate him when everyone thinks he's the good guy, you're gonna get yourself super arrested.
Exactly. And I did love it afterwards, once they found out he was the bad guy and he took them out. They're like, see, this is why I kill all the NPCs. You never know which one's the bad guy, real bad guy. I'm like, how many D&D people are out there who actually have that mindset, right? Like, you never know which NPC is the bad guy.
See, that's what insight rolls are for. You just insight roll every single NPC to find out who's sus and who's not, which is slightly annoying, but it is the much more tame alternative to just killing everybody.
Yeah, but then they go there, they confront him, and the paladin dies during the big fight. We should have mentioned earlier, the bard sucks. It took him how long to realize that?
Yeah.
Do bards usually suck that bad, or what? Because you're the more experienced one of the two of us. Do bards usually suck that bad, or what?
He just doesn't understand what the class is good for. This class is more supposed to be a matter of support and a more out of combat type stuff, and yet he's trying to play him like a main DPS. It's just like you're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, and he's discovering this class is really not my play style.
Good for seduction. I mean, he even seduces one of the ladies at the church who took a vow of celibacy. Boop, threw it out the window.
Or you could have a bard who is, say, a really good con artist that manages to make a lot of money or get the people that are doing the bad stuff to unwittingly give up secrets or whatever have you. Or you could even have a bard that's more like a spy and goes like a secret agent undercover. There's a whole lot of ways to play a bard.
But the way he did it was one of those that was like suicidal, right?
Yeah, it's just like he just did not understand the class he was playing.
Yep. But yeah, by the end they defeat him, and thus the goddess gives him a wish, and they were like, "We can be whatever you want."
Yeah, it's just like it immediately flips to the talk around the table. Like, hey, you could get so many of these things that, mechanically speaking, would have made them OP or been super cool or whatnot. And obviously, that's a lot of pressure on
It's the
somebody
girl.
who hasn't played this sort of game before, and just like,
But what does she do?
she ends up wishing for the paladin NPC to come back to life.
You wasted it on an NPC.
Which Cass severely underestimates just how quickly D&D parties can get attached to a character that might not have even been relevant to the plot at all before that session, but the DM just happened to describe them in a little bit too much detail, and whoops, they're the party pet now, and they would literally kill for them.
Yeah, but then Cass, he storms out. But I do like how if he had stuck around, he would have been rewarded like everyone else.
Yeah, it's just like he screwed himself out of the reward by not taking the game seriously.
Yeah, or by thinking about it from a meta sense.
Yeah, rather than just taking the world as it were.
But yeah, the bard gets his own thing, and then the sorceress gets turned into a purified. And she's like, "I'm chaotic neutral." Like, whatever. Yeah, but then but Cass does come back and apologize. He's like, man, I just missed doing the game.
Mm-hmm.
And now they mentioned something about the shadow, and then that one guy who's a survivor. Okay, here's what happened in the first movie, because they found that one guy who was like, "I can't do it, not after that incident." Total party kill. Yeah, something like that. Turns out somehow the characters they were playing in the first movie came to the real world and slaughtered everyone but that guy. For real. They just kicked in the door and stabbed them all because they thought they were necromancers. And then we later find out in a later bit, turns out they're still stuck in the real world. Because here's what they've been setting up this whole time. Turns out when you play these characters, the characters you play as in this world actually exist in their own world, and you're just taking control of them.
Interesting.
So every time they're like, yeah, and they start acting like how you're acting them. And turns out the shadow is a guy, which you find out at the end of this one as well, and that's why that one guy freaked out. He actually's been having an interest in the real world for a long time. He knows they're the real reasons why he fails. And at the end of the next one, we actually find out that they're playing the game. Meanwhile, in the real world, the shadow is talking to their characters like, "Yes, you have a problem with us. It's not you." Shows this playboard with all the real characters. It's them, and he swaps them.
Oh boy!
And we still don't know whatever happened to those people. We see what happened to their characters. They're now in the real world. But yeah, and turns out though, but that's how it works though. And now that to the point where if you have people in the other world playing a D&D like game, they're controlling people in the real world. And they call that one let me see what that one's called, because it's a cute name. It's called what is it? Where is it? Oh, Humans and Households.
Which is definitely sort of a running joke in D&D meme about fantastical characters playing like mundane games about our world. It's just taking that joke to its logical conclusion.
Well, yeah, but the fact that it's the opposite of Dungeons and Dragons, Humans and Households. But by the end, he's able to get the book out there, and the group are back together, ready to play some more. And and that's where it ends. It ends on the adventure continues. So overall, what did you think about this? Was this a good representation of D&D stuff? Do you think it kind of Big Bang Theory did a little?
No, it's clear the way that these jokes are made. It's made from somebody who's clearly familiar with the culture and a lot of the jokes that surround it and whatnot. Though it might be slightly out of date, given that the culture has definitely transformed, and I would arguably mostly for the better in the wake of 5th edition becoming so popular and people becoming more familiar with stuff like Critical Role and Stranger Things.
Well, yeah.
And I'm
Now,
hopefully maybe that'll finally break the curse on terrible D&D movies in the mainstream with the one that's coming out in March 2023.
yeah. By the way, there was. Did you know that in the '80s there was a D&D cartoon that was actually well made, and people have considered it the Gargoyles of the '80s?
I'm aware of it, but I haven't ever gotten around to watching it.
It is so, from what I understand, so good. And the fact that it had a series finale that never got made, but fans made it, and that you had a Brazilian car commercial company make a live action version of Sending Them Home.
Oh.
And it was so faithful. It's like, oh my God, these people actually took it very seriously.
Yeah, it's like you can get good stuff if you take it seriously and don't just treat it like, oh, it's just another generic fantasy thing.
Exactly.
Because it's something that's very distinctly its own unique thing. It can often be a whole lot weirder and off the wall than more classic high fantasy sword and sorcery stuff. And I think that's what makes D&D and stuff a lot more distinct than maybe other things in the general fantasy space. Is just it gets a lot more wild because people can be a lot more wild when you give them the reins to do stuff.
Exactly. And I will also say this, the fact that it is all, except for the jerk, the other guys actually are like, I really like that.
Mm-hmm.
How they went from wanting to not take seriously to realize, like, I had fun.
Yeah, and I feel like this sort of reframes a lot of the discussion just sort of around concerns of like, yeah, all of the new people getting to the RPG space today, because it's just like, not everyone is here to ruin your fun. Sometimes it's just a case of you've been doing the same thing the same way for so long, and you sort of then make the assumption that, oh, that's how these things should always work. When in reality, somebody who is coming into it, wanting to get into it with good faith at face value, can introduce something new to the experience that makes it more fun. And that's why it is fun to have new people at the D&D table, because without sort of the preconceptions of what typically goes on, they can do a lot of things that can make the game a lot more fun. And so you just kind of have to say, hey, is this person really just trying to ruin my fun, or are they offering something that I wouldn't have seen about this hobby otherwise?
Not only that, though, but you also have the notion of when does the dungeon master try and keep control and whatnot. I mean, I don't blame him for wanting to bring the paladin at first. I don't blame him with the type of people he had.
It can help sometimes to have an NPC in the party who can sometimes help bring things along. It's just the danger is going too far and having what's called a DMPC, who is basically the DM more or less telling a story to himself while the other players are just kind of basically props to it. It's just a delicate balance that needs to be struck. And this is the sort of stuff that a good session 0, where you set expectations and the bounds of what you're playing and then refer to when things go off the rails, to make things a smoother experience for everybody, because no two tables' expectations are going to be the same. And two people might be perfectly fine people on their own, but if they want to have entirely different experiences out of their game, then they'll inevitably end up clashing, even if those particular play styles themselves aren't necessarily bad. Like having somebody who's more interested in power gaming the numbers, while somebody who's more interested in the lore, role play, and the plot often end up coming to odds, at least in memes. It's just, you don't have to have these problems if you discuss the expectations you have for the table all up front.
Right, but it also doesn't help when remember it was pointed out saying, like, we apparently have a reputation. That's one thing you don't want to hear, is it? Like having a reputation of being that no one wants to join you because of it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, what would you give this as a D&D player?
I'd say I'd give this movie an 8 out of 10. I've definitely seen a lot of stuff with a lot higher budget do a lot worse. And it's like, there are definitely some bits that were like a little bit almost too cheesy and corny at times and grating, but overall I really enjoyed the experience, and maybe I'll have to check out some of the other ones when I have some time.
Yeah, definitely. So, and I mean, most of you can find this. It's available. There's maybe not all of it's available for free on YouTube, but a lot of them are, and then others you can find elsewhere for free. And check them out because it's called The Gamers. Remember that. And yeah. Oh, one other thing. Besides the girl, because I think that's obvious. Who was your favorite character?
I don't know. I think I'm going to have to go with Miss I'm Chaotic Neutral Sorceress. Just because it was just one of the most consistent source of laughs where it's just like, hey, you do remember that your character is a woman, right? And then sort of reversing that when the necromancer is like, hey, I want to take you for my bride. It's just like, I'm not, wait, crap. That was a fun way of turning it around on them. Like, hey, you're so interested in seducing everyone. Now here's a villain who's intent on seducing you, and you don't want to.
I know. And then but the fact is also based off of her teacher.
Yeah.
I was like, well, obviously she had to come from somewhere, right? But yeah, and it turns out we find out another one in the Natural Ones one shot that turns out his sister is big into it, and both of them feel the other person is not alright that date someone unless they were a hardcore gamer too. So it's like, one of those types. So yeah, until then, maybe we'll ever talk about the other ones. Who knows? But until then, we'll see you on the next one. Take care.